We're just waiting for everybody to join the meeting. We'll be starting very shortly. Just give it another 30 seconds or so. Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to the Waterbeach to Cambridge Stakeholder Briefing. My name is Peter Stanhope and I will be your chair for tonight's event. This briefing is to update you on the results of the recent Waterbeach to Cambridge engagement. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the regulations surrounding public health measures and the health risks associated with public gatherings, this workshop is being conducted as a digital event on Zoom webinar. Due to the webinar format, attendees are on mute by default and do not have the use of their camera. This is a feature of the Zoom webinar system, but individuals' microphones will be unmuted to allow people to ask questions in a dedicated slot a bit later in the agenda. We'll be taking some notes during the question session, which will be submitted to the GCP Joint Assembly on the 10th of September. To help us make sure we record your questions accurately, this briefing is being recorded. As this briefing is open to stakeholders and the public, it is also being live streamed on YouTube. Normal rules of behaviour apply, and everybody's reminded that any inappropriate conduct or disruptive behaviour may result in you being excluded from the event. We have technical assistance on hand to support the event, but please do also remember that everybody is joining the event from their own homes and that unavoidable technical issues may arise relating to broadband connections or home IT setups. Tonight's briefing consists of a short presentation by Paul van der Bolk, GCP Project Manager, followed by an opportunity for you to ask questions. Paul will be assisted by Atkins Project Director, Greg Hartshorn. To raise a question during the questions section, you will be invited to raise your hand and you use the button at the bottom of the screen. Please refrain from using the chat facility to ask questions. Simply raise your hand and we will get to you during questions at the end of the presentations. We will take those questions in the order that we receive them during the presentation. We have an hour for this meeting and we aim to finish at 7 p.m. and we'll do our very best to keep to time. However, we are flexible and if we need to extend the meeting for longer, we will do. I will now hand over to Paul and Greg.
Thanks, Peter. Welcome to everyone and thanks for joining us for the meeting. So I'm going to go through a short presentation setting out some of the feedback, or setting out a summary of some of the feedback that we received from the recent public engagement exercise that took place over the summer, dealing with the Waterbeach to Cambridge public transport and walking and cycling improvement project. So we'll run through the presentation now. First of all, I'd also like to hand over to Greg to just introduce himself. If you want to do that, Greg.
Hello there. Yes, my name is Greg Hartshorn. I work at the consultant Atkins. I'm the project director for this study, leading a team of transport planning experts assisting in undertaking this study, working with Paul. So happy to help Paul answer any questions you might have later.
My colleague Thomas is running the presentation. So Thomas, if we could go to the next slide, please. So Peter's already run through the agenda. So he's done the welcome and housekeeping. I'm going to run through just some feedback from the engagement and then we'll take questions. I think the questions will form the bulk of this meeting. So if you want to go on, Thomas. Next one. So in terms of the project aims and objectives, so we are looking at improving access to and from the city from the northern corridor, so between the new town that's being proposed and planned at Waterbeach and Cambridge, northeast Cambridge, so the station area in northeast Cambridge. So we're looking specifically at improving access for public transport and cycling and pedestrians between those two areas. So we're also looking at whether we can improve connectivity between existing settlements and identifying the best package of measures that will enable us to do that. So there may be some quick wins that we can implement as part of the scheme alongside kind of the main proposals that we're putting forward. And one of the key things is to ensure that connectivity is in place, the opening of the new developments, so in particular Waterbeach New Town, but we've also got potential new development at Cambridge Northeast. And therefore, looking to meet the aims, the GCP aims of reducing the propensity of trips to be made by car. And we're working towards the challenging target of trying to reduce car travel into Cambridge by approximately 25% of current pre-COVID-19 levels. So it's quite a challenge, and this project is one part of us trying to reduce car travel into Cambridge by providing means for people to use other modes of transport. So next slide, Thomas. So this is a very kind of a broad overview slide. It just sets out the study area, sets out the location of the existing station at Waterbeach and Cambridge North Station, shows the park and ride, the location of the park and ride at Milton, which we'll also look at as part of this project. And it also shows the location of Milton Country Park, the river, the A10, the new town at Waterbeach. So the black line kind of sets out the study area that we're kind of looking within. So if we move on, Thomas. So in terms of the history of the project, so we've been going for nearly a year now. We started with some engagement workshops that were held in November of last year. And at that time, I was just joining the project team. So I attended one of those workshops that was held in Waterbeach Barracks. And I know a number of the people that have joined this evening were also at that workshop. And then more recently, we've held a public engagement period where we've set out our proposed kind of 4 search areas that have been identified as kind of areas where it might be possible to run a new public transport link along with associated cycling and pedestrian infrastructure. And obviously that engagement had to take place online through a web portal and through several webinars and stakeholder briefings. We also undertook quite a large number of meetings with kind of key stakeholders such as Anglian Water, Cambridge Sports Lakes, Milton Country Park, and other key stakeholders in the area. So we received a number of surveys submitted. So 108 completed surveys were submitted. And on the online map, we received 174 pins and comments, which were all utilised and put into a public, basically analysed by Atkins, who have produced an engagement report that can be found online. We'll give the details of where that can be found later on. And as I said, we've obviously been engaging with other key stakeholders. So next one, Tom. So in terms of the feedback that we received from the engagement, we've split it into 3 main themes. So the first theme that came through was about safety. So a lot of these are kind of more we could possibly look at more in terms of providing quick wins to improve current issues that exist between Waterbeach and Cambridge. So one of the first key aspects was looking at introducing traffic calming measures, the redesigning of junctions to prioritise cyclists and pedestrians, and there was quite a lot of concern about the lack of crossings at junctions. The second theme was looking at pedestrian cycling and connectivity. And in fact, we received a lot of feedback on this subject. So one of the key messages received was that cyclists and pedestrians should have segregated routes away from traffic, and this is one of the things that we are looking to provide into the future, and I think we see it as also a fundamental requirement when we are creating new links between places. And then another issue that obviously came out of Waterbeach was the issue of cars parking on Station Road, Chapel Street and the High Street, and some of that is obviously linked with the location of the existing station, but it obviously clogs up that area, makes it hazardous for pedestrians and cyclists in particular, I guess. So those were two kind of key themes that covered pedestrian and cycling. And then the third theme, we did receive some feedback about public transport provision, and people were keen to see a more frequent, more reliable and more direct public transport service. There was concern that the current provision was a bit sparse, it didn't very well link places and was subject to a lot of delay. And another key theme was that there is a lack of timetable coordination between rail and buses, and also there's lack of timetable coordination between different bus services as well. So connectivity was seen to be important. So next slide. So following this engagement, in terms of the route options, so the areas of search that we put out there, we did make some changes to those areas of search, and I'll get the map up in a minute, but I'll just run through this slide quickly. So we had an eastern route, which is blue on the map, and I'll take you through that in a minute. And we now specifically reflects the potential to run along the eastern or western edge of the Sports Lake Trust proposals for the rowing lake. So we've kind of reflected their proposed position for the rowing lake. The A10 route, the route that runs pretty much online with the A10, we basically changed where it crossed the A10, so it could potentially link better with, we changed it at the bottom end. So rather than going through kind of the Northeast Cambridge development, it would actually link with the busway further down, and that was following engagement with the Northeast Cambridge planning team, who basically didn't have the space for the busway to swing east as early as we wanted it to. And then also likewise further up north, we've looked at a different crossing point for the orange route, so that it links better with, so that it could potentially provide a better link to the Cambridge Sports Lakes at the northern end. So if we get the map up, Thomas, it'll be easier for me to go through it there. So this map is a bit busy, and I might actually share my screen in a minute, which has a kind of a clearer map, which shows the route options. But we wanted to put this map up because it kind of shows some of the constraints, the high level constraints that we're up against. So you can just about make out the 4 route options. We've got the green western route, which kind of comes out of the west of the new town at Waterbeach and would follow a route that was roughly adjacent to Mere Way. The orange line there is Mere Way. And then it would potentially join up with the Cambridge Guided Busway and go under the A14, under the current tunnel that the busway goes under. Obviously, then there's a route already made direct to the Cambridge North East station. The yellow route on here comes south through Waterbeach Village, providing some connectivity with the existing village, and then crosses the A10 and makes its way across agricultural fields. Some key things on this route is obviously the interaction with potential sewage, the wastewater treatment locations that Anglia Water are currently what I've just been consulting on, and they're shown as the blue dotted areas. And then we've also got the issue of Milton landfill, which we've shown a route directly across because we wanted to investigate that route. But like we could equally go around the landfill site and potentially join up with the green route if this option was found to be a good option. The orange option similarly comes south out of Waterbeach, south through the existing village. There's basically a strip of land that is potentially available to run that line down. As I said, instead of crossing the A10 where the yellow route crosses, we've brought the crossing a bit further down south, so nearer to Milton. And this route would have the advantage is that along with the yellow route is in that it would come fairly close to Milton, so potentially enable a pickup point near Milton Village. And then we've looked at ways in which we would then cross the A10 and then cross the A14 before entering Northeast Cambridge, roughly along where that green line is running, which is the line of the Greenway. And then the eastern route, the blue route, as I said before, kind of follows it. Well, we've basically split it just north of the sports lake, so that we've got two options. One could run down the eastern side of the lake, and the other could run down the western side, and alongside the proposed greenway. And then likewise, we would have to develop a crossing of the A14 before entering the Northeast Cambridge site and running towards the station. So they're the kind of routes that we're engaged on. That's a very quick summary of some of the responses and the themes of the responses that we received back. So then if you want to move on to the next slide, Tom. There we go. I just wanted to wrap up by saying that, yeah, we'll take questions now because I think that will be a more productive use of the time for this meeting. But what we're looking at doing now is we will take our options appraisals report and the engagement report to the Joint Assembly and the Executive Board. The Joint Assembly is on the 10th of September, and as normal, you can submit questions. We'll give the exact date by when the questions have to be submitted.
Okay. We've got a first question from Linda Worthpole. Linda, can I have your question, please?
Hi, yes, my name's Linda Worth. I am the County Access and Bridleways Officer for the British Horse Society. I'm terribly disappointed that you haven't mentioned equestrians anywhere in this. Hopefully you are aware that the guided busway is actually a bridleway, so any connections to that must be bridleway access. Links between communities must be non-motorised user to include equestrians. Transport includes leisure routes. The local transport plan defines active travel to include equestrians. The Sports Lake Trust includes a bridleway around it. The GCP recent quick wins I am very concerned about, because the ones that have taken place so far have been disastrous because they haven't taken equestrians into account, and they need to be looked at very, very carefully. The impact of road changes on equestrians haven't been taken into account in any way. Any segregated routes must be multi-user routes to include equestrians. We did respond to all these consultations, so it's disappointing that we haven't even been mentioned anywhere on this presentation thus far.
Okay, point taken. So we will obviously consider the needs for equestrians where appropriate.
Right. Thank you, Linda. Do you have anything else to add?
And it's also worth saying that we will we'll look to work with you to identify those requirements.
Yes, yes, please, we are the people who know where things are appropriate. It's difficult for people who don't ride horses to understand. So if you would make a point of engaging with us, with the local bridleways groups, and with me as the Cambridgeshire representative of the British Horse Society, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, we will do that as we work through as we go through the project, and we get more understanding of exactly what our aims and objectives are, and we pin down kind of the route options. We'll obviously be working with all of the various groups that represent different transport modes in order to put forward the best package of measures.
Thank you. That's suffice, Linda. Thank you for the time. Okay. Right, next question from Eileen Wilson, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Right, I'm Eileen Wilson. I'm District Councillor for Cottenham and Rampton, and also a member of the GCP Joint Assembly. I was just looking at the various routes and the slide that said about joining to existing communities. Would this also include the communities to the west of the A10 who aren't currently on the guided busway and which currently don't have any public transport links to either Waterbeach or Cambridge North Station? This means that the residents, for example, this is just an example in the village where I live, Cottenham, people rely on one very slow bus route, and the tendency is to revert to car use. And a link to either of the stations, Waterbeach or Cambridge North, without having to use the car would be beneficial both to the residents and in terms of cutting car use overall. Thank you.
Thomas, can you just bring the map up, please, on the previous slide, so we can just leave that up? Okay. So, in terms of our study area for our key public transport link, we're obviously we've been given the red line boundary, or that's kind of the scope that I've been given to work in. With regard to your question about connectivity between the various villages, and we're talking about Cottenham here mainly, potentially Landbeach as well.
Willingham as well.
Yeah. Then, in terms of the core routes that we're looking at between Waterbeach and Cambridge North Station, obviously we're not looking at coming out that far. But in terms of this is where I mean this is I covered during the presentation. Well, it was quite a brief presentation, but I did mention that we would look at connectivity between various locations, and that in my mind that could include connectivity with those villages. So in answer to your question, it's kind of a yes, we'll look at that as kind of more of a, now once we've kind of identified kind of our main proposal, we'll look at how it connects with other places around, and how therefore people can get to it to use it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. Okay, can we get to the next question to Hazel Smith, please? Hazel still seems to be on mute. Sorry, we have a slight technical problem here. Not quite sure.
Just can you hear me now?
Yeah, we've got you. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Looking at the orange splurge, during the consultation as well, I was confused as to whether you're looking at lines for cycleways or lines for bus transport, or are you looking at general routes that might be one or other or both? That was the first question. then you've taken into account the sewage works in your map, but you haven't looked at the A10 options. I don't know whether that's because you know that they're not going to happen in that way across the fields, but it would be useful to know why you haven't taken them into consideration. The strip, the orange access route from Waterbeach, sort of parallel to the A10 coming south that you've identified, looks good. I'm just not sure where it goes then, because it sort of seems to disappear around the north of Milton. And then you've got that darker green area, which is Milton Parish Council's bit beside the A10, which I must say I was assuming would be part of the A10 dualling. So I'm just wondering how that route would work. That looks more like a bus route than a cycle route. But no, if you could answer those for me, that would be great. Thank you.
Thomas, do you mind if I just share my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Thomas, if you unshare yours, I'll share mine. Can everyone see that? Yeah, good. So it's a bit slightly clearer map, which shows the 4 routes without all of those constraints, which kind of muddy it a little bit. So in answer to your first question, the areas of search consider kind of all of the forms of transport. In some of the areas, we already have proposals. So for example, in the west area, the green area, the developers, Urban Civic at Newtown Waterbeach, are already proposing to create a new cycle and footway along Mereway with links up to the new town. So if that route was shown to be the best for our purposes, obviously we wouldn't be putting in another cycle and footway. We would be linking with the proposals that Urban and Civic are putting in place. Likewise, the blue route pretty much follows the current proposals for the Greenway, so it would be a similar scenario. The yellow and the orange route, however, don't. So we would obviously be looking at whether we needed to put in, transitway, footway, cycleway, bridleway in those areas if those areas were shown to be the best routes. In terms of the combined authorities proposals for the A10, so I'm part of their one of their working groups, so have sight of what they're proposing. We just felt that at this stage they're at quite an early stage in terms of all of their route options. So it would pretty much muddy the water if we showed all their options on our maps as well. But we are considering their proposals, and obviously we don't want to overlap our routes, but we're confident that by working together as with that team, they've seen our proposals, we've seen theirs. We will further, as we develop the project, we will obviously ensure that the proposals can work together.
Does that answer your questions, Hazel?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks very much for your time. Thank you. Okay,
oh, the one you didn't answer actually was about the Milton Parish Council strip around the side. That was previously mooted, I think probably in the Miram application. That was going to be a guided busway beside the road.
Where are you talking about exactly? Are you talking to where the orange route follows the route around the west of Milton?
That's right, yes, beside the A10.
So we're looking at, that routing is looking at to the west of the A10, not to the east.
All right, yeah, okay.
Thank you. Could we move on to Edward Lee, please? Thank you.
On mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So the objective of this project is to move people. It's not to build a busway. And I fear we've kind of jumped, as usual, straight to an infrastructure solution that was already defined really before we got started. And it seems to me we already have a high capacity people mover in the railway. And so what work has been done to look at designing bus routes that radiate out of Waterbeach, the new Waterbeach Newtown railway station, to provide connectivity for all of the villages into Cambridge, North Cambridge, Central Cambridge and Cambridge South, which provides a lot more connectivity option, and also London and Stansted Airport for that matter, which provides a lot more transport options for people in Waterbeach, Landbeach, Cottenham, Willingham, than building a busway simply between Waterbeach and a part of North Cambridge. So that's my first question: is what work has been done to evaluate that as an option, using the railway as the kind of trunk people mover?
So this project stems from the previous work that was done on the A10 corridor by the County Council, which identified kind of the various transport requirements that are needed in order to support new development, in particular the new town at Waterbeach. And that study identified that obviously you were right in saying that the railway can be a key mover of people. However, it also set out that on its own the railway is not enough, and therefore improvements to other public transport were required to support the growth and to provide the infrastructure that is required to move the amount of people that there will be. So that's kind of the basis, some of the basis for what we're doing. In the meantime, Atkins are currently taking that a little bit further and looking at, I've asked them to, as part of this strategic outline business case work, to do a more thorough assessment of whether there is requirement for segregated public transport route, or compare that to just providing additional public transport that can run on the current network. So that piece of work is being done. One of the issues we have is that the current network, the road network, is congested. So even if you increase public transport, a lot of the movements from that area are towards Cambridge. If you increase public transport, it would just sit in the congested network, not going anywhere. So it's not really attractive. We need to provide something that is actually attractive for people to use and reliable, gets people where they want to go.
Okay, so I mean, the first question is where was it set that or was it determined that the capacity of the railway is insufficient? Because that seems to be a highly questionable starting point. We know that there are some limits on capacity, in particular at Ely North Junction, which will be addressed in the kind of timeframes that we're talking about. And Waterbeach Newtown will be able to take longer trains, so therefore we can carry effectively twice as many people as now. So can we be sure that the basis for which this decision to build additional actually competing infrastructure is still a good one?
Yeah, so no decision has been made yet. We're at an early engagement stage. We're looking at options. And
sure, but I'm not. What I'm saying is we're not being offered options that are based around the railway. You know, that's kind of it was a decision that was made in the local transport plan in 2014 at a time when it wasn't. You know, that there wasn't much public engagement around it at that time, and people didn't realise the relevance of it. Whereas now it is very relevant, and yet all we're being offered are 3 corridors for busways. We're not being offered options that are based around integration of bus and rail.
Okay. I don't really have anything to add to what I previously said, Peter.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Edward, have you finished? Is that
Sorry,
it?
yeah, there's one other point, which is that if the A10 dualling is, the purpose of that is to decongest the A10, then that actually then negates the argument that the public transport requires its own uncongested corridor, because there will be additional capacity on the A10. I mean, there are obviously still issues around the capacity at the junctions, and that might argue for having a bus lane, for instance, on the final section of the A10, or I would argue that a link from the Milton Park and Ride to the A14 underpass behind the regional college would provide most of the benefit that's needed for public transport in order to avoid the congestion at the Milton interchange and also the traffic lights on the first few hundred meters of the Milton Road, the junctions with Cowley Road and the Science Park. So there seems to be a more tactically appropriate or more complementary approach if the A10 dualling goes ahead, as the Mayor seems fairly intent on it happening.
So I forgot to mention also that obviously we are working alongside the Combined Authority, who are also proposing the Cambridge Autonomous Metro. So the Waterbeach to Cambridge link also needs to look at options to provide a segregated link between Waterbeach into that future metro that's being proposed. So an on-road link is not part of those plans.
Right.
So there's a lot of things going on. So yeah, you're right. We've got the Combined Authorities Autonomous Metro, the Cambridge Autonomous Metro, sorry, the A10 dualling potential, and then the general requirement to improve public transport, walking, cycling, links between the new town and Cambridge. And at this stage of the project, we're kind of aware of all of those things, and we're trying to come up with proposals that kind of fit the objectives that we're looking at, and obviously fit within the local transport plan that's been put forward, and enable all of the proposed development to take place.
Okay, thank you, Edward. If that's okay, we'd like to move on to the next.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Could we move on to John Grant, please?
Okay. Yes, a few things I want to pick up on. The question of the use of heavy rail to get from Waterbeach to, particularly Waterbeach to Cambridge North. Sorry, I'm chairman of the Fenline Users Association. The trains start from King's Lynn and stop at Watlington, Downham Market, Littleport. There's development going on in all those areas. There are a lot of people who find that Downham Market is the nearest they can live to Cambridge with affordable housing. There's more proposals for housing just south of King's Lynn. before lockdown, the trains were full by the time they got to Waterbeach, and they were over full. Come December, we'll have an 8-car platform in the existing station, so that's actually no different to RLW's proposal. But you know, that's sort of pretty much full, and yeah, if Ely North Junction and the other things happen in maybe 10 years, then maybe there'll be a bit more capacity. But you're still running a train from King's Lynn to London potentially, just to carry people from Waterbeach to Cambridge North. So I think that's the argument why we need other things than heavy rail. Did you want to comment on that first? I've got a couple of others. Sorry.
No, that's a helpful insight, and it's one that will have come out in the study, but it's a good reminder of partly some of the problems that are faced and why the public transport offer that is being proposed kind of here is complementary to the heavy rail. Yeah.
In one of the slides, you mentioned specifically parking on Station Road in Waterbeach. A lot of that parking is actually residents. There are quite a lot of terraced houses that don't have off-road parking. And the parking we have does act as traffic calming. And those of us who have cats don't want the traffic going faster past our houses. That was just a remark.
That was just something that came out as what the public said to us through the engagement process. So it's just a point that came out, but what is to be done about it is very much open to discussion.
Yeah. Okay. And yes, you mentioned the metro, which does seem to be I mean, as I understood it, they were going to put a line somewhere in this corridor as sort of the first part before they dig the tunnels.
So this proposal, this project, if it's shown to be, a good way forward, would be that first link that you just referred to.
Okay, so that does tie in.
Yeah.
And I suppose the other thing that I noticed, yes, living in Station Road, on not so much on your map, but certainly on the slide, you showed the station being moved up to RLW's site, and all the options sort of going round the village. So those of us in the southeast corner were kind of left out on a limb.
Yeah, correct. I mean, you can see on this map that I've got shared, kind of everything finishes here at in the centre of the new town.
Yeah.
But we would probably, I mean, we're looking at extending that link to the new station, and then also potentially up to the research park if that's possible.
Yeah.
And then the route that comes south through Waterbeach, yeah, obviously it comes south through the western side of the village.
Yes, indeed. I'm not quite sure where, looking at the map, there are going to be 1 or 2 properties demolished to make that, aren't there?
I'm pretty sure there's a strip of land that is available, and there's enough space without demolishing properties, but I'd have to check that. I mean,
yeah, I mean, certainly at Denny End Road, there doesn't seem to be much of a gap. But yeah, that's certainly something you'll need to look at. And I mean, certainly the metro at the moment seems to just take people between the heavy rail stations, which seems a bit unnecessary.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. We Do we have any more questions? Because it's just gone 7:15, and yes, we do. Paul Bear Park, please. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, great. I just joined this call because I'm actually, well, I'm part of Waterbeach cycling campaign. We're interested in, you know, cycling routes as well as public transport routes between Waterbeach and Cambridge, and I live in Waterbeach. But I feel a bit like Arthur Dent. I've just discovered that actually 3 of the 4 proposed routes actually go through my house. So I'm quite interested to see that you've routed some of the proposed routes go through quite a lot of housing in Waterbeach, existing housing in Waterbeach. Is that really what you intend?
So do you mean the hatch lines on this map?
Yes, yes. It
So
goes
they don't go
straight through quite a lot of housing. Glebe Road, Glebe Estate, some of the houses on Cambridge Road. Is that actually what you intended?
No, so this line goes through land that is not built on.
That map doesn't appear to show that as far as I can see. I'd need to look at a more detailed version of that map. But it looks like it goes straight through the middle of my house.
No, it doesn't. It definitely goes through land that is not built on.
Okay.
I mean,
I'll take your word for it, but I'd love to see a higher resolution version of that map.
Yeah, I guess the quickest way is just to quickly go on Google Maps now and have a comparison. But see if I can do that. Do you want to go to, is that, have you got any other questions?
No, that's my only question.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Paul, should we move on to the next question from Andrew Carlotti, please? We're just letting you in, Andrew. Sorry, we still have you on mute.
Is that better? Are you hearing me yet?
Yes, we can. Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. So one thing that I notice seems to be missing from any consideration in this is services that might cover the centre of Milton. All the options as shown on this map go around this around Milton, and there's no. Looking at this, it seems to me that a sensible thing might be to have improvements to allow buses to bypass the A10, but still continue to serve the centre of Milton, perhaps with a bridge to the south, and then either bypassing the existing A10 to north, or if the A10 is bypassed, using the existing A10 to get between Waterbeach and Milton. It doesn't seem to me that there's a good need for having a high-speed route running between Cambridge and Waterbeach, given that the railway already does this. It's not providing services beyond Waterbeach. So unlike, say, the existing busway to Northwest, where the buses do run up through Northstowe, St Ives and so on, they cover the longer distances. For Waterbeach, there's not very much beyond Waterbeach. So I don't see why there isn't any consideration of providing services that cover things on the route, such as going through the centre of Milton and onto Waterbeach that way, and leaving longer distance faster demands to be covered by the train.
So can I answer that? So it's a good question. Part of the answer is that for these routes, we're looking at providing segregated public transport routes, and it's very difficult to do that if you come through the centre of Milton.
I guess my question is why is segregation a thing that you're specifically looking for? I mean, I'm not aware of how good Milton is at the moment in terms of congestion. Is that something that would cause a problem if in terms of delays and reliability issues? But it seems to me that that the need for segregation hasn't been, the need for full segregation hasn't been clearly justified here, and there's no obvious consideration of partial segregation.
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, to answer Edward's question, we're currently looking at that very question as to whether, so what is the argument for full segregation as opposed to either non or partial segregation. However, what I would say is that, so what we're looking at here is not necessarily the same as the guided busway. It's obviously a public transport route. We don't exactly know what vehicles will run on it yet. I don't think we're looking at a similar construction to the guided busway. They would be looking to the future and to slightly different technologies, probably using optical guidance. So in essence, we would be creating a public transport road. Like the guided busway, there's no reason why vehicles using that road might not come off and go through, take different routes. So for example, I know the busway at Northstowe can come off the busway and go through Northstowe to pick up people. That could be something that could be looked at in a similar way through Milton.
All right.
Does that answer your question, Andrew?
I think so. I would like to see this it being mentioned in the future, of course. Just one more thing that I remember right from the beginning of the start of the presentation. There was something said about not being able to use Cowley Road for routing or something like that, but then the lines on the map still seem to show it going into Cowley Road.
Right, so we can see it more clearly. We can see it more clearly on this map. So let's zoom in a bit.
So you mean that bit of Cowley Road?
So the original orange route. Can you see my cursor? Follow the line.
Yeah.
Across here.
Okay. I see what the.
But what we've done is we've had to.
I see what the point is now. I got confused because Cowley Road, at least according to the maps I'm looking at, has 2 sections, and only one of those sections you're now planning to avoid.
Yeah, so we have to avoid this section here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We can move on to Richard Stobart, please. We'll just bring you in Richard's drawing. Thank you. Richard, you're there, yeah?
Okay, I sense I'm online. So a few comments first and then a couple of questions. We were discussing Station Road, and I wouldn't particularly like to focus on Station Road in Waterbeach, but it is a difficult road for pedestrians and cyclists in particular. So yeah, I agree with John Grant that parking does slow the traffic up, but it does make for quite a dangerous road for cyclists. So I think we need to kind of unravel those issues. So that's one comment. Another on rail capacity, and we are very constrained, I think, by what can be provided by the railway structure, the industry structure in the UK. But things like given the very few bridges that exist between Ely and Cambridge, increasing the loading gauge to increase the capacity of trains is a longer term possibility, and that would seriously increase capacity on this stretch of route. So, it would be nice to feel that there was a longer term perspective on things like improved signalling schemes and increased loading gauge as possibilities. So to my questions, destination, we've talked about a little bit, and kind of east to west connectivity, where people might be wanting to go from Milton to Histon or Waterbeach to Cottenham, or Cottenham to connect with railway lines. And my question would be, we touched on this earlier, but how does that touch on technology choices? For example, small electric on-demand buses as one way of dealing with relatively small movements of people, but feeding larger transport modes or modes with higher capacity. And then final question on integration. So we've talked about the big picture here, the big routes, but often, you know, people's choice about using things is how easy it is to make a transition between modes. Or as you come off a cycleway into a town, you know, are you crossing dangerous routes and so on? So I think the integration, it was touched upon at the beginning, but it would be nice to kind of zoom in on some of the crossing points and the convergence points of this potential network and ask the question, would people like to use this? Would they feel safe? So so I've wrapped up a lot of stuff there, but perhaps you could tease out the questions and give a quick response.
Okay, let's tackle the last one first. So you're right. I agree with that last point about you know, would people like to use these routes? We're not at that stage yet, though, but it will definitely form part of the considerations of what we're doing here. In terms of the points about the railway, kind of agree. It would be nice if we could influence that, but it is actually, you're very much in the hands of the rail operators and kind of their program, their timescales. So it's very hard to, this, you know, from where I'm sitting, we can identify things that we would like to have, but it's very hard to get those actually implemented as part of kind of, you know, strategic network of things that we're trying to achieve. So I think that's all I can say on that, really. And in terms of the links between villages, yeah, as I mentioned, so first of all, I think we need to establish kind of what our main proposal, what our main preferred kind of proposals are to link between the new town and northeast Cambridge, which is what the project objectives are. And then following that, we then need to look at the connectivity between the routes that we're proposing. And by connectivity, I mean how does, you know, connectivity between, for all modes of transport, so connectivity for cycling, walking, other non-motorized users, and for the public connectivity between public transport users. And that might include also park and ride or travel hubs, the location of a travel hub or park and ride in the area, looking at whether Milton Park and Ride is in the optimal position or whether park and ride is required in a different location. So as we move through the project, we will cover those areas that you've suggested.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Richard. Right, that seems to be the last of the questions. There's no more hands raised at the moment. So we've reached 7 o'clock. So unless I have any other objections, we'll close the meeting. Thank you very much for Greg for joining the presentation. If we are unable to answer your questions, or we have further questions, you can contact us at greatercambridge.org.uk. And if you'd like to submit a formal question to the joint assembly, you have until 10 a.m. on Monday the 7th of September. Paul Bearpark asked a question in chat. I don't know if we want to bring that up. Yeah, Paul says, to follow up on my comment earlier, please could you provide more detail about the yellow, blue and green areas of interest that looks as if they pass through the junction of Glebe Road and Cambridge Road in Waterbeach. These are areas of interest, pass over many houses on Glebe Road and Cambridge Road, including a brand new house just built opposite Glebe Road. Did we answer that question earlier, Paul? Or?
No, we'll look into that in further detail.
Okay, thank you very much. Paul, we'll get back to you.
But as I said, these are areas of search at the moment. They're not definitive routes. there's still a lot more work to do in terms of assessing the routes in the proper way. And Greg, do you want to say anything?
Yeah,
about
Greg,
that?
you did actually have your hand up and then you disappeared.
Oh, did I? Oh, okay.
let's
No,
say
I totally agree. I mean, we'll obviously look at that in more detail. As far as we know, we're not none of these areas of search require any impacts on existing built property. So, but yes, we're still very early stages, and that's exactly the point of this kind of event to pick up anything like this. And we'll certainly go away and look at that one in more detail after the meeting.
And I have one more in the chat, which we can just get rushed to if we do it quickly, from Greg Martin. Will you look at smart ticketing for bus and train?
To be honest, I think it's a good idea. I will see what I can do to influence the operators to bring that about. Yes.
Okay.
I already discuss it with them on a, wouldn't say frequent basis, but I discuss those kind of things when I talk with Stagecoach.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for your time this evening. And as I said, if you need to contact us, please contact us at greatercambridge.org.uk. We have all your chat comments as well, and if you've left a message in there, we will also respond to those too. So thank you very much.